Hello and welcome to the Black Soldier Fly Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, David Taverner, and in this series we dig beneath the surface to uncover what's really happening inside the Black Soldier Fly industry. Hello everybody and welcome to this week's episode, wherever you are in the world. And the guest I have with me today is a specialist of the waste industry here in the UK, where I'm from, and he's dipped his toe recently in the black soldier fly market in terms of, waste and black soldier fly. But I want to use this episode to highlight a bit of a case study of some changing dynamics in the market for waste and how that can be perhaps or hopefully conducive to what we're trying to do here in the UK. So without further ado, Chris Smits, welcome to the Black Soldier Fly Leaders Podcast. Can you tell me a bit about your background, the company that you're running, and how you have got to where you are today?
Yeah, thank you, David. Appreciate you inviting me on. Elite Recycling Solutions, we're 19 years young later this year, and we started and set out as a single source solution waste and recycling service provider. And really what we've focused on is not just supplying waste services, but very much helping to drive the environmental and sustainability credentials of our clients. So we've been able to become quite a key partner with our client base and make sure that we're driving information-led data reporting, volume value, greenhouse gas emissions, and use those to drive through our client reviews a real progressive action plan for them future progress and ensure that we're offering a continuous improvement approach.
And is this working in organics waste or all types of waste?
Across all waste streams, everything and anything. So we do handle a lot of food waste, but also general waste, hazardous waste, cardboard, plastics, metal, everything and anything to do with waste and recycling.
Okay. And your company, Elite Recycling Solutions Limited, what kind of clients do you work with in terms of organics?
In the main, we're working with retail supply chain, supermarket supply chain, fresh produce businesses. That's very much, my wife and I started the business. That was our background. So before finding waste and recycling, my father was a glasshouse grower. So I grew up earning my pocket money on the nursery. He, along with some other local growers, built a business supplying the supermarkets with salad produce. So through the 70s, 80s and 90s and the dominance that came from the supermarkets. So I learned an awful lot. I was very fortunate working throughout that business across all different areas of the business, from technical and quality to operations and commercial. And that really helped me to understand how a business is run. And I'm sure many would agree that the supermarkets are extremely demanding, very high standards. And so those were some key disciplines that when we found and then set up Elite Recycling Solutions in the waste sector, it struck me that the industry was certainly more fragmented than retail supply chain. And so in my view, there was really an opportunity for a business to add value by bringing together all of those solutions. And so we've really built the business on the disciplines that we've learned from retail supply chain, because to be a retail supplier, you've got to deliver at the right price, the right quality, and at the right time, just to be regarded as another supplier.
Yes, I was in a past life, I was a supermarket buyer for vegetables myself. And
right,
I was
okay.
at one of the big ones in the UK. I was told by my bosses constantly, like, we'll pay you well, but you've got to make sure you get a good cost, a good availability, good quality. You got to get, improving metrics on all three of those. And I was thinking, Christ, I'm not going to be able to do
quality, service, and price, isn't it? That was the drive.
Exactly.
And I'm sure still is.
Yeah. And, if you want better quality stuff, it's generally accepted that you pay more for it. And especially if you're trying to get it, even better service than what you're getting already. I mean, you go to the supermarkets and there's stuff on the shelves all the time. But anyway, that's a different matter. In terms of, you're working with these kinds of customers as still. Is it in that kind of value chain, right?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we've managed to grow the business and we work with a whole range and wide variety of industry sectors, but certainly retail supply chain and the volume of food waste that we handle is quite high.
And so, what are their kind of conversations that you're having with these people with regards to food waste? What's driving them?
A lot of pressure is coming from the retailers themselves, alongside their own continuous improvement approach and wanting to do things better. Obviously, there's a significant drive to try and reduce waste in the first place, but there are certain processes that will create offcuts and trimmings. And so there's a degree of waste which is inevitable. So I think where Elite steps in and where we pride ourselves on driving with innovation is to look at the detail and see how we can try to move that waste up the waste hierarchy. And it might be some small changes operationally. So we're very active on the ground with our clients so that we can help training and signage and all of the good things that happen internally that try to then arrive at a product at the end of the day for them, so that we either reduce costs and increase value wherever we can.
Okay, yeah. So you mentioned there reducing costs, but you've also increasing value, so that there's a push and a pull factor there for some
Yeah.
of your customers to work on. If we start on generating value, that would be things like appeasing what the supermarkets want, right? In terms of the overall offering. I imagine, as again, previous buyer myself, some of the conversations I had back then were, what are you doing about sustainability? Because that's important to our customers.
Mm.
How much value do you think it is generating to say that, you know, you are recycling waste better than competitors?
I think there's an expectation and an obligation, a producer responsibility. So clearly, as I said, it's to reduce the waste wherever they can with pressure. Quality parameters are going to change seasonally, of course, but to improve their own internal operations to reduce that waste. But ultimately, what the supermarkets want and what the supply chain is trying to do is to drive down those waste figures. So, for example, where possible, if there's no contamination and the product range is correct, then an animal feed solution is absolutely the right way to go. That can be difficult for a lot of processors, especially with a mixed product range. So obviously anaerobic digestion has grown significantly over the last sort of 20 years. And when you have packaging involved in the mix, that is a very important part of the overall solution.
Okay. In terms of different types of waste, then let's talk about, we might have a meat processor, we might have a vegetable pack house. How do they differ in terms of opportunities for them to process their waste?
Regulation obviously drives a lot of that, and what can happen. Meat processors generally, there's a value to that waste, because of rendering is going to extract value from that sort of product range. For fresh fruit, vegetables, salads, there are absolutely opportunities in animal feed, but again, it depends on the circumstances and the operational factors of the client and how much segregation they can do, what measures they can put in place to ensure that there's no contamination or minimal contamination. And so we work really closely with them to look at that level of detail so that we can be confident that if we're going in a certain direction, for example, animal feed, that we're going to comply.
Okay, yeah. Going back to what we were talking about earlier, when you've got the push and pull factors, how about costs then? How are you helping to reduce costs for these suppliers to improve the price that the retailers pay?
Yeah, the waste industry is difficult because pretty much certainly if you separate commodities for waste services, they just go up. So we have that unenviable task of advising clients that, for example, landfill tax goes up every 1st of April. And even though we're not landfilling anything, it does underpin certain services. So incineration will go up, composting will even go up. These influences and these factors come into play. Transport generally goes up. So from a cost point of view, they generally are rising year on year. So we have to work smart. We have to look at ways that we can reduce some of the volume in those waste streams, and again, better segregation so that we can try and divert more volume into what becomes recyclable and a commodity, and therefore that switches it from a cost to a revenue for the business. And again, we're really active on site with our clients to help them with training and with signage and things like that, so that Some small changes can make quite a big difference and capture a greater volume of recyclables. And then that will inevitably bring costs down for what they're having to dispose of.
Okay, and so all of those different costs of waste, landfill through to composting and AD in the middle, or whatever it might be, can you give some what you're seeing in the marketplace, some figures to those different costs? Landfill. Let's start with landfill tax. What's that sitting at?
Well, landfills, that's going up, inflationary increase for April. There was a significant rise of about 21% last April,
Per ton, right?
per ton.
Oh,
Yeah.
21%. That's more than inflation.
And that was the previous government that put that one in.
The Conservative government.
So yes, it was. Yeah. The landfill tax escalator drives, and then you've got gate fees on top of that. So we're fortunate we're working across the whole of the UK, so we can see some local differences, and that'll be to do with capacity. But general waste will be anything from around £120 up to £160, depending on what part of the country you're in. That's per ton.
That's a council discretion, is it?
Not necessarily council, because there will be landfill sites,
Okay.
but most companies really now are not landfilling. Incineration has been the way to go. Landfill has very much moved away and out of fashion for the industry. So incineration is at those sort of levels. So companies bring that back and will then process it as an RDF, refuse derived fuel, or an SRF.
So instead of putting it in the ground, we're burning it, and we're
Yes.
collecting some of the gas as a result.
Generating electricity and
electricity. Sorry. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're getting a bit out of it. Is there still a lot? I imagine there's quite a lot of greenhouse gases that come out of incineration as well.
I believe in all of the information that's out there that the level of emissions capture is very sophisticated, and so it's certainly widespread across Europe. We've been probably slow to making sure we've got enough capacity here in the UK for incineration. But yes, it's not very, when it comes to planning, it's very, very difficult to get over the line. Not very popular with local residents. But I think the science and the technology that captures the emissions is very, very effective.
So why incineration is a pretty simple method, isn't it? You create the structure and then you burn the inputs, I believe. And so why would we put up anaerobic digestion or other things if we can just incinerate?
Well, because first of all, incineration is more expensive than anaerobic digestion. And really the industry is driving to make sure it recognizes resources. Now, if you've got, by definition, residual waste, general waste, unrecyclable, it's mixed, it's dirty, it's contaminated, then there's not much you can do with that. The process happens after. Waste companies will sort manually and mechanically to extract as much value out of that general waste as they possibly can. Because, of course, they want to reduce the volume that's going for incineration because it's an expensive disposal route. So if you're converting, again, touching on my point that we apply with our clients on the ground, if you can reduce your residual waste by extracting anything that's recyclable out of that, cardboard, plastics is an obvious example, then that's becoming a revenue. So the same principle happens with food, and a big impact being simpler recycling regulations that have come into place. I think there is somewhere around 40% of councils still in the UK that are yet to provide a separate curbside collection for food waste. I'm in East Hertfordshire and we started last August. So up till that point, my household food waste was going into the general waste. So if you imagine that tonnage, that's quite a cost to the council taxpayer.
Yeah,
so
I'm in Shropshire and we don't have food waste caddies in Shropshire.
Okay.
So this is a call to the Shropshire Council to get some food waste caddies over to me. But you're saying that's got to happen.
So that's got to happen by the 31st of March of this year. Councils are obligated by government to provide a curbside collection of food waste. Now, we don't get involved in curbside collections, but the principle is the same for businesses. And small businesses for 10 or more employees have to have a separate food waste collection. So what we've been doing is working very hard with our clients to make sure that we've got the right segregation, the right bins, the right signage set up so that it's much easier operationally for them to capture food waste And then with simpler recycling, there's four waste streams. There's food waste, there's cardboard and paper, there's dry recyclables, and then there's the residual waste, general waste.
Could you just, for the purposes of this audience, could you just describe briefly what simpler recycling regulations are?
Yes, so simpler recycling regulations and policy changes really introduced by the UK government. And the aim is to standardise what's recycled and what's segregated across councils. There's still a lot of differences. So the aim, and I think a very positive step and an important step, is to make sure that we are all segregating that little bit more and trying to reduce what is just thrown away as general waste and then heads off for incineration or in some cases landfill. So it's broken down into targeting four areas: food waste, cardboard and paper, dry recyclables, which would be plastic, tins, cans. There are some differences across service providers in what can go in. Some might take glass in there, most won't because of breakages and contamination. And then the fourth being general waste. So you've got to target four waste streams effectively to separate out from all of your waste. And back to your original point about why do we not just incinerate it? So the disposal costs for food waste to anaerobic digestion is significantly cheaper than incineration, and yet we're getting the benefit of using that very clever and simple technology to produce methane, and then that's either gas to grid or burnt through turbines on site and generating electricity. So it's making sure that we're capturing these resources and using them.
Yeah, okay. So I'll come on to AD in a minute and look at that more detailed. Simpler recycling, if we zoom in on food waste, how are we going to segregate food waste when it's not currently segregated? What's the plan from the government?
There's an obligation on the producer to segregate, as there is on each household, and there will be for those councils like yourself that are not offering that just yet. As I say, in East Hertfordshire, we're not doing it until August of last year. And there's a responsibility and obligation on you to separate out your food waste from your general waste.
Okay.
And then that's a separate collection. So the same for businesses. Many businesses, certainly in fresh produce and food processing, will be separating out their food waste already.
Yes.
And it may be just a little bit of capturing what happens in the canteen and offices and things like that.
So if I'm Mr. Del Monte and I'm the Del Monte man, and I've got all of this fruit and veg coming out of my pack house, but I've also got plastics as well. If I don't segregate them, what happens now?
If you're a commercial entity generating a lot of food waste, the vast majority are separating out their food waste from their general waste. There may be packaging involved in that. There will inevitably be some packaging that is extremely difficult for that company to then put the labour to it and the time to it to separate that out. But anaerobic digestion facilities have a depackaging facility, so they can cope with a degree. It's got to be food waste with some packaging, not packaging with a little bit of food waste. That's an important emphasis. But the anaerobic digestion will be able to take that mix and depackage. So what companies and what we try to do very much so is to see whether there's an operational capacity to be able to make sure it is free of any packaging. And then, of course, the opportunity to move up the waste hierarchy and look at animal feed or black soldier fly as a good case in point, very much then becomes an opportunity.
Okay. But in terms of if you get caught not doing it, is there a fine under this new policy?
There isn't anything at the moment. DEFRA have not put any fines or anything like that in place. There's an obligation that may change. Obviously, this is rolling out and being a phased approach. So no, it's good practice, and at the end of the day, that will all translate back into if we're doing it wrong, it will certainly come back at us through taxes and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Okay. And so you mentioned as well that from this year, April, I believe, councils will have to offer a food caddy to all households, so that households, not obliged, but they do have the opportunity to separate out their own food waste at source. So essentially, we could be, as a nation, getting this huge pile of food waste, whether it's from councils or from commercial entities. How are we going to deal with this? Do we have the capacity to deal with this right now?
Well, that's exactly what's happening, and been happening probably for over a year as it started to roll out. And there's an awful lot of food waste going into ADs and animal feed and all the various options for processing that are out there. So that volume is very much going up and going up very quickly. So what we're seeing as a business supplying lots of anaerobic digestion groups across the country, that there's a volume being driven to them through greater segregation capture from business as well as from household. So I think there is a potential capacity issue. At the Food Waste Conference in London last March, DEFRA felt that there wasn't a capacity issue, but I think some key voices in the AD sector were making it clear that within 2 years there's going to be a capacity problem. Now, bear in mind that was last March, so we are seeing it that gate fees are going up. If you're supplying certain products into AD, it's obviously very much connected to the calorific value of the product that's going into them and the level of packaging and that sort of thing. But gate fees are generally going up.
What sort of
And there
figures are we
is,
talking about with gate fees? I know there's local differences and things.
yeah, there's a lot of differences, but just to give a ballpark, and it really does depend on what the product range is. But if you look at a fresh produce, fruit and veg sort of level, a couple of years ago, that might be a zero gate fee or £5-10 a ton. And we're seeing that going up to 20s plus 40s,
Wow, that's a big
and it really
change.
depends on what capacity the AD has and what other product that they can get in. And with all of these council contracts, and bearing in mind my point earlier that 40% of councils, around 40%, aren't yet offering the curbside collection, that's going to have a big impact on the volume, the increased volume that's going to be going into AD. So there are some ADs under construction, but I'm not sure how that's being mapped to what volume is going to be coming through the system.
Okay, is there much difference between fruit and veg or council waste or meat pack house or meat processing waste or all of these different types of waste? What's driving the differences
The
in
difference
in gate fee or
cost,
appetite for the
basically, purely
AD?
calorific value.
Okay, talk to me about that.
Calorific value and level of packaging. So if you take salad produce, some of that's going to be 95% water. So there's not much of a benefit for anaerobic digestion. There's some benefits with the water content, but if you take that to the extreme then of a curbside collection, which is likely to be meat, fish, dairy, fruit, veg, and a big combination, you've got much higher calorific value, and that's ultimately what the anaerobic digestion facility is trying to generate is a methane gas yield.
And so, from my understanding, they being the anaerobic digestion facilities, haven't been taking curbside collections, or they have been taking salads or fruits and veggies because they have been segregated previously. So they're available, whereas they haven't taken the curbside as much because they haven't been segregated. So there hasn't been the volume of them, but they're now starting to switch. Is that right?
Area specific, David, but
Yes.
where it's available, there's a lot of ADs that have got council contracts and progressive councils that have been doing it for some years. In other areas where it's not being required of the residents, it's not there. It's not being segregated. So that
But
volume is
yeah.
going to then come out of the general waste and become available.
Mm.
And anaerobic digestion is the destination for it. To give you the contrast with the commercial sector, though, if a company is generating any kind of volume, and by that I mean probably a ton or more a week, they've been segregating for a long time because it's the right thing to do. And commercially, in the cost of disposal, is absolutely the right thing to do.
Okay, yeah. So commercial entities, it's more the economics that's driving it, as well as the CSR reasons or personal
Yes.
obligations. But it's really
Yeah.
the curbside council food waste that is driving this dynamic shift in the market.
At this point, yes, over the last year, and it will continue, I think, for the next year.
Okay. So it will continue. We'll start to see perhaps more of a leveling off across different councils if there's an obligation to do it. Might see ADs popping up in those areas which don't, which will be forced to do it, which haven't previously had the curbside collection, such as in Shropshire, perhaps. But then in terms of the AD, the RHI, the which is essentially the subsidy scheme for ADs, right, has ended.
Mhm.
What's funding ADs now? Is it pure economic basis, gas prices and gate fees, or is there government help still?
Some will still have incentives, and I think there's a requirement to be up and running and operational in order to comply with certain support tariffs that are out there. But I think what's affecting AD and gate fees as well is that energy prices have been coming down, and there's a capacity issue that's driving gate fees up because ultimately they're trying to create a revenue from what they're producing.
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of look at some of, on a slightly different angle, some of the things that AD is having to deal with outside of food waste. Well, there's, I guess, two other streams. You've got food, surplus food. You've got energy crops, where it's crops specifically grown for AD, with the idea that it
Yeah.
produces good gas yield. But you've also got manures and kind of agricultural residues, where in certain areas of our country, particularly in the west of England, on the Welsh border, we've got too much nutrition because of intensive livestock farming. And so where is is getting into the rivers, and so we need to deal with that somehow, to avoid river pollution.
Mhm.
And a lot of ADs have gone up as a solution for that. But then it's a case of what happens to the digestate, which is the other output from AD plants, and does that go in? How
Yes.
how do we avoid that getting into the rivers? Because that poses a problem itself. So we've got to come up with all of these different solutions, and all of these different organics, whether it's causing pollution, whether it's causing greenhouse gases, they're causing problems if they are just simply wasted. And anaerobic digestion can deal with it, but it also can't. It doesn't solve the full problem. So I think, on the topic of black soldier flies, that is the reason for this podcast. Is that a tool that can deal with these food wastes differently, better or worse, but perhaps differently to anaerobic digestion? And is it? I think personally, with no bias whatsoever, we should be exploring black soldier flies more as a waste processing than we currently are. And that's my personal view. And I don't know. From
Yeah.
I met you at the Black Soldier Fly conference in
Yeah.
Cambridge in September. We've been speaking ever since. And that was your first experience specifically of learning about black soldier flies.
Yeah, yeah, and it is very exciting. Yes, it should be. It has every opportunity to be part of the solution. There, to your point with AD, there isn't one solution fits all. We're trying to make sure we maximise resources, reduce where possible the use of natural gas and other raw energy. Food can be a wonderful substitute for that, but black soldier fly needs to be part of a mix of solutions, and I think it's really exciting. Yeah, it was great to meet lots of people at the BSF Con, and then since then we've really been trying to meet as many as we can in the industry, learn who's doing what. We're handling a lot of food waste. Our clients are really excited about it. To my point earlier about moving waste up the hierarchy, or ceasing to become a waste because it is an animal feed, is a major plus for black soldier fly. But I think the industry seems to be clearly crying out for a company to prove it's viable and to be profitable. And there's a lot of research, there's a lot of smart people involved from what I've seen. Some well-funded organisations. I think any industry in its infancy tends to have a lot of academics in there, and again, everyone's crying out for a company to show that it's commercially viable. The momentum swing at the moment, and all that we've talked about with anaerobic digestion is certainly leaning towards black soldier fly if it can prove it's a viable competitive alternative.
Yeah, okay.
I think the AD sector, David, is the AD sector and legislators have got to look at this potential capacity issue. And this was conversations very much in the public domain in the food waste conference last March, to look at what the incentives, government incentives are for AD. And because investors will look elsewhere if those incentives are not so clear, then we can be running head first into a capacity issue. But meanwhile, alongside this, black soldier fly, absolutely really interesting way of handling your food waste.
Just on that capacity issue, what happens if it's true that we do have a capacity issue, and then suddenly we've got all of this food waste segregated? If we've got ability to process, I don't know, 75% of it, that's our capacity for processing the waste. What happens to the other 25%? Does it go to landfill or incineration, or what do you?
It's a good question, and I think we've not seen that happen. Obviously, composting is still an option. More challenging if there's packaging, and obviously if there's any animal byproduct in there, that's got to be in vessel composting. And there is a limit. There's limited outlets for that. So yeah, going to be an interesting direction of travel.
Yeah, you'll have to keep your crystal ball out for the rest of this episode. I think we are speculating a fair bit.
Yeah.
Spoke to when I was in South Africa, I spoke to a guy called Sam Smout, and he was the essentially the background is the Western Cape, Cape Town is in South Africa, the region. They have a new policy that I think has probably gone into place now, where they are saying zero waste to landfill, zero organic waste to landfills. You know, similar
Right.
sort of vibes to what we're seeing here
Yep.
in England, and they don't have the anaerobic digestion capability that we have, and I don't think they have as much composting. They do have composting, but perhaps not as much. Essentially, they were sending a lot of stuff to landfill, and now they were saying let's not. So they've got a bit of a blank slate, and they looked at composting, AD, and black soldier fly because they have had a fair bit of black soldier fly activity down there commercially. So they've got quite a few good minds and good experience. They looked at it from a blank canvas, and Sam concluded that black soldier flies were the most economical way of doing it.
Okay.
From a cost point of view, I suppose, but also the outputs, you know, the protein, the frass, and the capex as well. ADs are quite expensive to put up, right? So that's the conclusion. That's what they're, I believe, going towards, unless directions have changed since my conversation with Sam. And so they are investing in black soldier flies, which is exciting to see. Obviously, we don't have a blank canvas here. We've got a lot of AD. What's it going to take? I know we've got regulations in the way in the UK for processing waste with black soldier flies, but what do you think is going to take, and are there any learnings from how anaerobic digestion has expanded from the past to where it is now? What do you think it's going to take to get black soldier flies into the picture here in the UK?
AD's had incentives, government incentives, and that really triggered an increase from when I think I started the business in 2007. I'm thinking there was somewhere around 18 to 20 ADs. And now it's probably pushing 200. So I think the momentum is swinging in the kind of feedstock that I understand black soldier fly sector is looking for is also the kind of feedstock that the AD sector is questioning the benefit of, because it's a lower calorific value.
This is your fruit and vegetables and salads.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think that is very much where the pendulum swing helps and supports the black soldier fly sector. But really, we need, as a business, when we look at an opportunity with a client who's generating a certain amount of tonnage each week of fresh fruit, vegetables, and salads, it's where can we go? And there isn't really many that are able to take much volume in the black soldier fly sector, that is. So we need companies to appear and be viable, obviously, because I think that the supply is there.
Yeah, I've found this as well with my startup journey, is that getting your hands on food waste, like small amounts of food waste, well, first of all, it's very difficult because if you're producing the food waste, you just want, and you're producing, I don't know, 20 tons a week or 20 tons a day, I don't know.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
want someone to just pick it all up rather than taking
Yes.
piecemeal. But then secondly,
Yeah.
from your own operations point of view, you can't be taking, a ton here and there because to process it, it's so labor intensive to process it.
And it becomes a nuisance for the generator of that waste. If I've got to get a dough level or two, a week to go off to black soldier fly, it's a little bit of a disruption to their operations.
It's like boys and men, really, isn't it? And
Yeah.
yeah, and from my
Yet the
point of view,
interest there, very much so.
yes, yeah, my point of view as well, my personal point of view with business or operations is you need a minimum threshold to pay for the equipment of processing it. So you do need to be
Okay.
taking in that 20-ton load weekly at the minimum, I'd
Right.
say, to be able to process it, to
Yeah.
put it in your facility. But obviously, to take 20 tons, you need that scale, and investing in that scale
Yeah.
is difficult when
Yeah.
sources of
You need
finance.
some kind of reception.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and without a regulatory approval for a lot of the offtake, it's difficult to work a profitable business model. So there's quite a few things at play
Yeah.
here in the UK, which makes it really difficult. The one, and I'd like to, again, for you to perhaps get your crystal ball out, Chris, the opportunity since speaking with you back in September and this conversation now is in the here and now. The gate fees available for these lower calorific value items of fresh produce gives an opportunity because black soldier fly producers can step in to take the stuff that AD facilities won't take anymore and get paid for the input price. And then it's just a question: can you make your facility cost effective enough, and then can you sell your product to create the margin? So
Yeah.
you're getting a little bit of revenue from the input, you're getting a little bit from the output, and then you're reducing the cost down massively. Can a black soldier fly company in the UK do that? This is the opportunity. It's here and now with the input prices or the gate fees, that's driving it. So then the question is, how long do you think these gate fees will last for if you were to predict it?
Well, if we look at the information that's shared and a reference back to the food waste in March of last year, there's a capacity challenge coming within 2 years. So if we say that's another year, I think we've got, and it takes some time for an AD site to be built. I think a modest estimate would be somewhere between 15 and 20 million pounds in construction costs.
That's for what kind of
So
size AD facility?
I would think something that's taking probably 200-300 tons a day.
Yeah, okay. So that's
I've never
yes,
had the fortune of having to build one. That's what I hear.
yeah.
But I think to be interviewee turned interviewer, what do you think the black soldier fly sector needs as a sort of shot in the arm to really be able to compete?
There's a first. I haven't been asked a question like that yet. So yeah,
Right,
pressure's on.
right.
Pressure's on.
Happy to oblige.
Well, in the UK, I guess if we need regulatory change ultimately, but there is an opportunity here to use a feedstock that's going to pay you revenue for the feedstock, i.e., this fresh produce here.
Okay.
That is allowable. Essentially, we could do it at the moment with that feedstock, but I'm very, very aware that, like you said, the capacity issues won't last forever because people will enter the market based on these kind of figures and with a need for it. So how can we grow our black soldier fly businesses based on this feedstock revenue that is available to us? How quickly can we grow our businesses to get the costs down so that when those gate fees suddenly become a zero cost, or potentially you've got to pay again for those feedstocks because of those market
Yeah.
dynamics? Whenever that is, you need to have made sure that you've got the scale and the cost down for your black soldier fly business. And also you've developed those off-take markets, whether it's into agriculture or whether it's into sort of more niche value added markets, to then
Yeah.
have business that can afford to pay potentially for feedstocks. Or has the regulatory landscape changed to allow black soldier flies to take in more food waste, whether it's the council food
Right.
waste? Then those black soldier
Broaden the scope.
can continue to get paid a gate fee for processing wastes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's so many ifs and buts, but I think it needs, perhaps we need to tell the story that there's an opportunity without the regulation changing for the very short term, but at the same time that doesn't mean the regulation needs to change. The regulation needs to continue to, or with the lobbying still needs to happen. The regulators need to be aware to change what's going on to allow more feedstocks into black soldier flies to solve problems. Essentially, we're not doing it for commercial reasons, necessarily for commercial reasons. We're doing it to solve problems: river pollution, food waste, greenhouse gases, all of these kinds of things. And so, I don't know, it depends on that kind of, you need a few things to fall in place and to allow for it. But in terms of current, I know that, go on.
Sorry. Do you think that the regulation change on the sales side of the larvae, so into the customer side of things, would have a greater impact in terms of the potential success of black soldier fly?
My view is that it's the feedstock input that will make the biggest impact.
Okay.
Because
Right.
of the cost of it.
Mm.
The cost of feedstocks. If it's not fruit and veg waste, then it'll be
Right.
a cost.
Yeah.
In Europe, they've changed it to allow processed animal or processed insect protein into poultry and pig industry, and they're still struggling just because the price of producing those insects, a lot because of the substrate input.
Right. But it's a progressive step, isn't it, to support? And if that happens and follows here in the UK, then that just opens up the customer base for black soldier fly.
Yeah.
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 There is an obvious challenge to black soldier fly is with animal feed. And again, very much depending on what the product range is, animal feed can command a revenue. So if a company is generating the right mix of, let's say, vegetables or something that's got a good calorific value, that will be a competitor for black soldier fly.
What other animal feed? Sorry. Yes. Yeah. It would be, and it depends. I speak with someone else who's a Nuffield scholar. I was speaking with her the other day about how is the black soldier fly industry going to develop, and we think it's going to turn into kind of two different tiers of business. You're either kind of output focus, where you take in more stable waste streams like fruit and veg waste, which you kind of know what's.
Yeah.
And you produce outputs from it, and those outputs generate the value for the business, and whether it's animal feed and stuff, and that's where there will be a competitor from animal feeds. The second tier of business would be more of that kind of hardcore waste processing business, which is solving those waste problems, and so taking that government incentive, if that kind of comes to light, and probably a gate fee as well, because it's more of a hardcore waste where you don't really know what's in it. But I just couldn't see regulators in the near future approving the outputs to be used in animal feed because of the safety concerns.
Right. Yeah.
So actually, it's more of a waste process. It's essentially a composting business. You're turning all of these mixed wastes or manures into a very stable and effective land spreading medium. Essentially, it's composting, but it's composting on steroids. It's done over the course of 1 month.
A high quality soil
4 months.
fertilizer.
Yeah, less emissions, more nutrition remaining in the compost, and done over 4 weeks rather than 6 weeks.
Right.
Yeah, so it's more efficient composting, in my view.
Yeah.
But it's keeping it away from the food chain, because that's what we're all scared of, and rightly so, because of what's happened in the past with mad cow disease. Yeah. So that would be my answer to your question. In terms of your business, so how exactly, if there's a black soldier fly producer in the UK that is interested following this, listening to this podcast, they get in touch with you. What is it that you would help them with, and how does it work?
I think that we're well placed with the kind of volume we're handling, around 5,500 tons a month of different food waste. So I think that we're well placed to focus on what the feedstock requirement is, the specification, to look at how that can be consistent. And that strikes me as a challenge for the industry in terms of what it's producing consistently at the end as larvae, and then also to manage the supply side of it, logistics, and also to reduce the volume going in and increase the volume going in, as there are inevitable challenges and opportunities for a black soldier fly farm.
Okay, yeah. So you connect black soldier fly farmers with the waste providers through your network. You potentially even move
Well,
it.
we would supply it directly ourselves. We're handling it, so we would, as I say, look at what's best suited, and then supply that at the right place at the right time.
Okay, okay. So then, who you talk a lot about your clients? Who is the client here? Is it the people you're taking the waste from, or is it the people you're sending the waste to?
Yeah. Okay, we call them clients because we're both buying and selling from
Mm,
them. So that's how we've created the distinction in terms of how we identify them. They are they are the generator of the waste, um, or the recyclables. But we've got a number of clients where we are actually returning them through cardboard and plastics and value items. We're returning them more than they're being charged for the wider waste services a month. So they're actual across their waste and recycling, it's a revenue stream for them. And that's something we're really proud to have worked hard on with our clients to make that swing and that change for them. So yes, we've always then regarded them as a client.
yes, but then what about the black soldier fly producer? They're also kind of a customer or something, I suppose, or a buyer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we would view that as a processor,
Yes.
a disposal outlet.
Hmm.
So that's kind of how we classify. You know, if we're using hauliers, they're a service provider. If we're using
Yeah.
processors, plastic processors, cardboard processors, black soldier fly, that's how we regard it.
Yeah. Okay. And you'll ship it to the black soldier fly site. So essentially, you're offering that kind of waste that it's outsourced input, feedstock input, isn't it? Really?
We kind of regard ourselves as a logistics expert. We're moving probably 70 to 80 vehicle movements a week across different parts of the country. So there's a lot of energy and focus going into the logistics side of things, because sometimes it can be quite very time sensitive, and we've got to make sure that we are consistent with the producer of the waste, and equally when we're committing to supply a waste or a recyclable to a processor.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. From my point of view as a black soldier fly producer, that it's waste is a really really difficult thing to get your head around. You know, if you haven't got any experience in the industry, and so having that
Yeah.
expertise on your side is helpful. And wrapping up this really really interesting conversation, it's kind of highlighted that having that expert on your side is really valuable to you wherever you are in the world. So I know this has been super focused on the UK, and it might not be relevant to you wherever you are, because I've got listeners from all over the world, which is great.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But this is like a really interesting case study as to perhaps how it could work. Another case study from my travels, I saw a company called Chansey, who Andrew Wallace was my very first guest on this podcast, and they took it in their country of Kenya and Tanzania, well, particularly Tanzania, where there isn't really infrastructure for processing waste.
Right.
So then he set up next to, essentially one of their sites is next to a landfill, and so then they take whatever their capacity is, they just take that from the landfill, or they divert
Okay.
it just before it gets to the landfill. They've got their own sorting line where they sort out all of the non-organics and create value from that, whatever they do with that. But then all of the organics, they send that down a different line, and then they put that into the black soldier flies. So they've actually pivoted or expanded from a black soldier fly company and they've created this group of companies, and one of them is just total waste management, and that is
Mhm.
born out of
Right.
necessity, because they were they started off, or they tried to separate it at source, at households and things like that. But there just wasn't any kind of
Right.
compliance. So instead,
Yeah.
they are sorting it
Yeah.
at landfill or just before landfill.
Yeah, that's their value added offer to take it all in house and manage the process. And we started out in the early days to be that single source solution, because the way we saw it is that the clients, the generator of the waste, they want to have one business looking after all of their waste streams. And of course, there's expertise across each waste stream, but by bringing that all together and then joining up all of that data feed for them, we're one solution, one phone call, one point of accounting. And then when you start working on as we do with our quarterly reviews, to build, well, what are we going to do next? What's our action plan? A lot of those things fall into touching on each other, operationally, so that you can achieve some efficiencies.
Absolutely. Well, Chris, it's been fantastic speaking to you. Really appreciate you sharing this case study of and specialist knowledge of what's happening in terms of the dynamics of the UK organics waste industry, and also, speaking about the different processing routes like AD, incineration, and, what you're doing to help and how you're getting involved as well with the black soldier fly market. It's what we want to hear. So thank you so much for coming on, Chris.
Pleasure, David. Thank you for inviting me. Really appreciate it. It's good to see you.
Thank you very much for listening.